Good afternoon. Welcome. This is Steve Picaro. We're going to be jumping into our webinar, The Power of Soft Skills, and our goal is to talk a little bit about how soft skills can help you in your business and your career. And we're going to jump right in. Because of time, I want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, but also I want to respect everyone's time. So let's take a moment, quickly talk about our goals for today. I'm going to take a moment to talk about a couple of housekeeping tips. I'll do a quick intro for those of you who I don't know or haven't had an opportunity, pleasure to meet yet. And then we'll do our presentation, and we'll have some time for a few Q&A questions and anything we can talk about. I want this to be more of an interactive discussion engagement, and then at the end of the day, really want you to leave with one idea that you can use for yourself, or at least open to new perspective or looking at things a certain way with some of the information we shared today. So thank you for that. So let's jump right in. And again, just making sure that you can hear me okay. If there's a problem, please send me a note. We'll be jumping right in. All right, so I think, quick housekeeping tip. If you look on the screen on the top left, you'll see there's an opportunity here to mute yourself. At the moment, everyone is muted during the presentation just to help with the feedback. Sometimes the connection gets distracting, but when we do the Q&A, I'll unmute everybody for the moment. Also, if you have a question during the presentation, you can type it right into the question box and send that over. There's also a quick chat box if you want to send over a message while we're going there. Also, if we get disconnected, and again, we just had a storm here in the Northeast. It's windy, there's ice, and it happens on occasion that we have a get disconnected. Doesn't happen that often, but feel free. We're going to jump right back in on the call. And also, in terms of professionalism, just be respectful while we're chatting here. We try to keep this an open and an informal discussion, but we just want to be a little professional on the call and respect everyone's opinion and thoughts as we go through this process. With that being said, let's jump right in. Quick intro. Again, my name is Steve Picaro. I've been a coach and a consultant for the last 11 years. My company is One for All Coaching. I have a Sales Plus program, work with small business owners and organizations, and I do a variety of things in my business. But before that, my previous life, I spent many years in orthopedic trauma. I basically sold everything from fracture, total joints, DME, biologics. I did some hand, I did some foot. I did a little bit of everything, so it's very exciting. We can spend some time talking about that. Before that, I spent 5 years working in the operating room as a Navy corpsman, first assisting, doing some minor surgery and all the fun that went along with that, and that's really where I cut my teeth in the operating room. So I have some clinical, technical background, and then I've been out in the field for 20 years as a sales professional / independent / distributor. So again, we'll certainly spend some time chatting about that at some point. So I want to jump in again just to respect everybody's time, and let's talk about why are we on the call. You know, as much as people throw soft skills and hard skills out there, we talk about how powerful soft skills are, and a lot of times people dismiss the power of soft skills. But when we think about soft skills, they're the personal attributes that allow us to effectively relate to others. Very simply, these skills enhance our personal interactions that lead to greater job performance and satisfaction. But at the end of the day, these soft skills, unlike the hard skills, they're interpersonal and can be applied in a broad array of situations. A lot of times we think technical and knowledge skill set, people say, you don't have the knowledge or you don't have the technical skill set. But in my experience, many people leave the job because of their soft skills, or they get let go because of soft skills. Soft skills cover personality traits, behavioral traits, communication styles. They cover things such as optimism and perseverance and abilities, many which can be practiced. And one of them we're going to talk about is empathy. And like many skills, soft skills can be learned. It's amazing how many people say, I went to, on-the-job training, I went to college, I had experience. But like many things, sometimes we don't focus on our soft skills. So one of the thoughts, quote for the day, Maya Angelou had this great thought, and I run into this a lot. I think we all have empathy, but we may not have the courage to display it. And again, in a business setting versus a personal setting, sometimes being empathetic is looked upon as a detriment to being successful. But I think at the end of the day, as a sales consultant working in the operating room for 20 years and interacting with that surgical team, having that empathy, very powerful. So that's really setting the tone for what we're going to talk about over the next 35, 40 minutes or so. But throughout this presentation, and again, I really want to get some feedback. Feel free to send over a question or a chat as we go through it. And again, if you can't hear me, please let me know. If there's any type of technical difficulty, I'd like to know that as well. So let's talk about soft skills. What exactly is a soft skill? So we're going to share some examples of soft skills. A 50,000-foot view. When we think about soft skills, we talked about personal attributes that allow us to effectively relate to others. And when we apply these soft skills, and I like to think of them as glue that hold the bricks together and some of the things we do in our work situation, these skills help us build stronger work relationships. They can certainly help us be more productive, and many times they help maximize our career prospects, especially if you're out there transitioning, and we'll talk about networking as well. But when you're working with clients and customers, think about the restaurants, the other businesses that you go back to. It's because the way they treat you, the way they serve you. Many times we place the focus of our career development or bringing somebody on our team on hard skills. Do they know the computer, right? The technology? Do they have knowledge and expertise? Other skills that specifically relate to the ability to get the work-related task done. Many times if you're interviewing or you're hiring, that's what they'll ask you. Show me examples of that. So the funny part is, during all that practice, sometimes we neglect our soft skills and we don't get a chance to develop them as much, and we're focusing on the hard skills. And it's great, except many times it's hard to quantify the soft skills. So let's talk about something that's transferable to any job, any organization, any industry. And when we talk about developing soft skills, how it will help you regardless of where you're going. So the first one is communication. And when we talk about communication, it includes listening. It includes giving and receiving feedback. Many times, I know years ago when I started my sales career, one of the first types of training I went through was public speaking. Because we were told if you were going to be a sales professional, you had to be able to give a presentation. And the funny part is, over the years, I realized that I really had to do more listening than speaking. So communication includes presenting, listening, but also giving and receiving feedback, both personally and professionally. I think one of the things, and again, we'll talk about this going forward, communication, two-way street. In the operating room, being able to work with a surgical team through a difficult surgery, trauma late at night, communication skill was very important. I don't remember anyone or very few people taking a public listening class. The next soft skill, and again, I think it's one of these things gets downplayed, showing empathy. The ability to understand and share the feelings of others. And it's funny, in my career, I've had the opportunity to be very empathetic working in a healthcare situation, but in the military, I've had the opportunity to work with many people who, where they saying, you don't need empathy. We want to focus on the facts. We need to stay focused on what's going on. But being empathetic, I think in the healthcare field and in any service industry is something that's, I don't think, highlighted enough. And again, we're not even talking personally, but if you think about how many people, their personal and professional lives, where they dovetail or overlap, it's very important that we know how to show empathy. Another good example, networking. Whether you're going out there to network and to grow your business, whether you're going out there to network to change your career prospects, this is a soft skill that we may not do on a regular basis. I've run into many people for again, there's many reasons, right? They've been working for a company for 5, 10, 15 years. The company gets sold or purchased or downsized, and they're out there networking, and they said, gee, I really didn't have to network this way. Or, I'm so busy with my family and my personal situation, I don't have time to network. But networking is a soft skill, building relationships. We call it networking, but it's really building relationships, personally and professionally. And I think another example of soft skills is confidence. The self-confidence that we project, the way we go out and we interact with people in a professional setting for the most part, but sometimes personally. Are we going to be able to address situations and problems that come up on a regular basis in our day-to-day work? The confidence that you project, and again, if you're networking, if your career is evolving and you're out there connecting with individuals, what's the self-image that you're sending? If you're in business, as a business owner, as a manager, as a professional, what's the image that you're projecting when it comes to self-confidence? Are you able and up to the task? Are you going to be able to overcome adversity? So these are just quick examples, and again, we can talk about this going forward, but I just want to think about some of these soft skills and how I think they're very important, how they help connect the dots when we talk about hard skills. You can learn how to use a computer, you can learn how to sell a certain product, but it's the soft skills that allow you to do it, in my opinion, successfully and consistently. So let's talk about empathy and emotional intelligence. It's a big buzzword over the last 5, 10, 15 years. It's been out there, and it's one of these things that it's moving to the forefront in a leadership role, in a sales role, in a personal development, professional development role. Empathy is perhaps, in my opinion, the most important soft skill we can develop for better interpersonal interactions. And I've been married for many years, and I can attest to that on a personal level, but also professionally. Empathy is the ability to identify with another person's experience. And again, 50,000-foot view. Often we think of empathy in terms of only identifying with someone's pain or negative experience, but we can apply empathy in a variety of situations. For instance, when I did a brief introduction, I wanted to let people know that, hey, I worked in an operating room. I was out in the field as a sales role. I do run a small business. I can connect with many people who've been in similar situations. I've been married, or I'm married now. I have children. You know, these are experiences that many people share that allows us to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And when we do that, it helps us craft our responses and also experiences usually other people's emotion in some way. As a parent, if I ask people on the call, as a parent, what are some of your challenges you have with your children or raising children in today's environment, we could all shake our head and empathy and say, yeah, I know exactly what you're going through. If you're running a small business, if you're bringing in new employees, if you're looking for a new career, and you say, geez, it's frustrating out there, many people on the call can say, yep, I know exactly what you're going through. When we demonstrate our empathy, it's helping us create connections with other people. Usually when we network or we associate with people, we do it with like-minded individuals, people who know exactly what we're going through, or we're trying to get feedback from other individuals. It also helps us build a team or create shared goals. And when we're building a team, and I do a fair amount of work with small organizations and team development, how do we get everybody on the same page? And it's interesting when we look at teams, and if you use professional athletes, most professional sports teams are made up of one sport. You have a baseball team, a hockey, football, and so on. Very rarely do you have teams of different people playing different sports. Some organizations may have a team where everyone has a different role. You may have a customer service team, you may have a sales team, you may have a technical support team, and there could be people from many different departments, but they share a common goal. And this is one of the ways that we expose that and create that connection when we have that empathy. It also, and again, when we talk about interpersonal connections, team members and colleagues, it also allows us to focus on people who have complementary skills or different skills when we're trying to build that team. So when we have these conversations, and as I mentioned earlier, listening is one of the skills that really helped me over the years when I was out in the field, and it helps me now. It's getting to know where people are coming from. When we talk about emotional intelligence, empathy is one component of that emotional intelligence. Some people look at the emotional intelligence as the ability to recognize and manage our feelings so they expressed appropriately for the situation. Exercising emotional intelligence helps to create harmonious, productive relationships, personally and professionally. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about this going forward, but when we think about emotional intelligence, there are 4 components that we look at: self-awareness, the ability to recognize our own feelings and motivations; self-management, the ability to appropriately express or not express feelings; social awareness, our ability to recognize the feeling and the needs of others and the norms of a given situation. And I think that's, again, we can talk about any of these for a long time. And then the last one, the relationship management, our ability to relate effectively to others. Now, when we look at all of these taken together, these skills make up our emotional intelligence quotient. Some people call it EQ, emotional quotient. Some people will call it EI, you'll see different people. I use different tools and assessments when I work with clients sometimes to measure this. We look at this to measure your ability to exercise soft skills such as empathy and other soft skills depending on your situation. So I'm going to take a break for a moment, catch my breath. I just want to, any quick questions or thoughts, you can throw out a chat, throw out a question. I just want to make sure we're on the same page before we jump forward to the next slide. And this gives me an ability to grab a quick drink. All right, good. So let's talk a little bit about professionalism. Why are we talking about professionalism? Many of us are on social media. We use different types of social media, and we say, well, LinkedIn is more professional for what I do than Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or other things out there. And it's funny, when we use the word professionalism, for some people it conjures up images of a cold, distant, brusque business person. Somebody on TV is only focused about business and growth and, whose baby is that, and I'll buy that. And, we used to joke about, he's a professional. And sometimes we'll look at people. For years, I would go into a physician's office and I would see people dressed in their dark suits, and you could look at them and you say, oh, those are other sales professionals, pharmaceutical, medical device. Certain areas you go and you see someone in a suit and you say, oh, he's a banker, because he's dressing for the part professionally. Many people have a sense or an impression that to be professional is exactly the opposite of demonstrating empathy and emotional intelligence. And it's funny how TV, I think, sometimes sends the message to us, right? If you're professional, you can't show empathy, you can't show emotional intelligence, you can't use any of these soft skills. However, being professional is a key soft skill. It doesn't require you to be inauthentic, distant, or detached. I think just the opposite. It allows us and it forces us to be more professional. Professionalism is simply the ability to conduct yourself with responsibility, integrity, accountability, and excellence. And for those of you who have teenage children or young adults who are out there going off into the world, this is something that we stress as parents. Or if you're working with young people in a mentorship role, how do you take that and stress that in a way they can understand? Acting with professionalism also means to communicate effectively with others and finding a way to be productive. And again, this is a spectrum, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. But professionalism involves what may seem to be small acts, but really have an impact. Very simply, reporting to work on time and returning promptly from breaks. I have a client where they're struggling with some people on their team who work in an office setting. Day to day, there's always somebody on their team that's showing up late or doesn't return from breaks. How about communication? Speaking clearly and politely to colleagues, customers, and clients. And I'm going to admit this in public. I go to the mall once a year, usually around the holiday or my wife's birthday, and sometimes when I'm interacting with some people who work in a mall, this is a challenge, getting people to look you in the eye and speak clearly. Dressing appropriately, again, I hate to say, hey, I'm at that point where, I have 3 boys, and my boys are wearing clothes that may or may not be appropriate depending on the circumstance. Being clean and neat, again, I think it goes with, hey, I'm a man, I don't need to do this, but especially for young boys, I have to say, guys, being neat and professional and being clean sends a sign of respect. And then the last one, striving to meet high standards for whatever work or environment you're in. I can look at this and say, you know, for most people, this is an appropriate summary of what professionalism means. For instance, dressing appropriately. I had a discussion years ago with a person in one of the classes I was giving about medical device sales professional. What's appropriately? Well, if you're going to call on a physician, if you're a man, you wear a suit. If you're a woman, you're going to dress appropriately. But you'll see people walking around in scrubs, coming to and from the hospital setting in a pinch in warm weather. And I know down south, my friends who are down south, if they wear a shirt and a tie, it's very humid down in Louisiana, down on the Gulf Coast, they're changing their shirt and tie on a regular basis. They may wear a polo shirt, which may be appropriate in the summer. So I think depending on your industry, your situation, you have to come up with the parameters. Being clean and neat, again, is a difference of opinion depending on your industry. But I assume most of us are coming from the medical device field or healthcare related, where there's going to be a little bit more of a conservative approach when we talk about professionalism. If I always have a question, I'm in doubt, I'll always, you know, we talk about dressing to the next level, being clean and neat, showing up early, all the little things that you, company culture or your own individual ethics dictate. So professionalism is one of these soft skills that we talk about that can be learned, no doubt about it, with young professionals. And then the next one, very interesting, learned versus inborn traits. Because soft skills are talked about as traits or dimensions of a person's personality, it may seem as though you have to be born with them. With some soft skills, they do come more easily to another, but soft skills are not inborn. Very simply, like all skills, they can be learned. Because we all have our own preferences and our ways of moving throughout the world, some soft skills may be more difficult to learn than others. And that's where it depends on your environment, your exposure, multitude of factors that come into this. But if you think back, there are also aspects of our hard skill set that were difficult at first. And I think back years ago when our first computer came out, right? We had to get our computer. We had to learn how to use that. Now we can't imagine working without our computer, without our cell phone. My first cell phone, all I could do was hit the numbers and dial. Now my cell phone is a smartphone. It has so many features on it. We had to learn that. We develop soft skills in the same way as we develop hard skills. We practice. We go in situations. We emulate people. And we adjust our behavior to the situation. So spending time with people who seem to be able to effortlessly demonstrate a soft skill that you find challenging is one way to build your soft skill set. And a perfect example of this is when you're mentoring with somebody in your industry, a colleague or somebody that you look to demonstrate some of those behaviors. Another way is to seek opportunities where you can practice where there's a low, non-threatening risk of failure, somewhere where you can go and be yourself and not feel like you have to be on stage. And one of the public speaking is a great example, right? Many people say they're afraid to talk to groups, but if they go to a certain setting, maybe it's church, maybe it's a community group, all of a sudden they're talking to a group of people and they don't even realize it. So when you go somewhere where there's a low risk, you can practice and you build up that confidence and that ability. You don't have to be born a natural networker or a natural salesperson or even an empathetic person. You can build and learn these skills throughout your career while you're building your business and while you're growing into whatever new role you're going to. I get that question a lot about salespeople. I don't think I was a born salesperson, and I don't think I'm a born salesman now, but I know how to ask questions. I know how to listen. And the same thing with leadership ability. And when people are growing their business, we're going through the same process, and we need to figure out how to do that. So let's talk a little bit about, I think, the next steps, or very simply, we'll talk about a case study. I think this is a good time to step back and say, what are other people looking at, and what have they experienced, and what can I learn from them? Because we all have somebody who, oh, did I do that? I think I did. I think we all do that, know somebody who's been through a similar situation, and we can learn from them. So for our case study, we're talking about Dee. She was not a people person. She preferred to work by herself, and her position at her company allowed her to do that most of the time. She valued her productivity and her ability to meet deadlines and exceed expectations, and anything that got in the way of that was an annoyance. When she had to interact with coworkers throughout the day, she preferred to keep the interactions as brief as possible so she could get back to work. Her coworker, Angela, mentioned that people often found Dee unapproachable. "I'm just not wired to be social," Dee told her. "I don't relate well to others when I feel like they're wasting my time. I've always been a loner. It just comes naturally to me." Angela explained that she also preferred to focus on her task and work independently, but she had learned to relate to her coworkers so that she could have a more harmonious work experience. So Angela encouraged Dee to try changing her approach to coworkers, to try to see them not as interruptions, but as fellow humans who are worth paying attention to. Dee decided to try this, and though it was hard for her, she realized the next time a coworker interrupted her while she was working, she wanted to really listen and to find out what he needed rather than rushing them out of the office. She realized that her coworkers often didn't come to her until things were in crisis because they found her distant. She then realized that by cultivating better relationships, there is a way to prevent crises in the workday. So for Dee, and this is an example, and I've experienced this with some customers, clients that I've worked with, there are people, most people would look at Dee and say, oh, she's a gatekeeper at one of my offices, or she's someone in a company where she's put in that role to prevent people from coming in. But there are people like Dee who naturally, we gravitate in a certain situation. You have people who want to interact on a regular basis, and you have people who don't want to interact, and then there are many people who fall in the middle. So when you're thinking about soft skills, and I know a person who's in a leadership role of a large company. It's not a, well, relatively large, but we had this discussion about he had to practice his soft skills to grow and develop. And it's only because of his soft skills that he is where he is today. Certainly has the technical skills and experience behind him, but when we interact with people, it's the soft skills that we seem to recognize first when we're interacting with them as a professional. So just want to quickly summarize this. Having the technical skills and knowledge to successfully execute your job duties is only one part of being the best you can be in the workplace. In addition to these hard skills, we also need soft skills. Soft skills are those skills which allow us to effectively work with others, no matter what your position, organization, or industry. We work with people. Taking the time to build effective soft skills can contribute to a more efficient, harmonious, and more productive workplace, not only for you, but for your team, as well as your own overall job happiness and satisfaction. And I think at the end of the day, and I had to learn this, no one, again, I'll use marriage as an example. I had to learn my soft skills for a marriage, right? If you think about using soft skills, where do we learn our soft skills for a relationship of that depth? And I'll share a quick story, and then we're going to open it up to some Q&A for a moment. But when I first was with my wife, I had a bad day. I was in sales. I had just come out of the operating room. I had just jumped out into the field. And for those of you on the phone who know what it's like interacting with people, clients, business, it can be frustrating at times. I came home one night. I'm sitting down to dinner. My wife asked me how my day was, and I just regurgitated, and I just kind of gave her a dump, and I really just vented. And I wasn't venting at my wife. I was just venting in general. And my wife said something that stopped me in my tracks. She said, "You wouldn't speak to your customers like that. Why are you speaking to me like that?" And I was like, whoa, she's was so dead on. I mean, my wife is the best coach and mentor I've had when it comes to relationships. And from that day forward, it reminded me, when you think about soft skills, I started treating my family like my customers and my customers like my family. And that was the first time, and that was many years ago, that I started making that connection, that it wasn't just the hard skills people wanted you on the team, or you wanted to be effective. You know, people hired you or brought you into an organization. It was also some of those soft skills. So again, I can spend a lot of time sharing my personal stories, but I'd like to kind of open it up to some Q&A and talk a little bit about soft skills, your experience, if you have any questions about them, or if there's anything I can share with you that might help you use your soft skills out in the field today. All right, I'm going to, I think I can unmute you. Feel free to mute yourselves. If you want to type a question, feel free to do that. But who has a question, or who has a story they can share, or an experience of a soft skill situation? All right, did I get a chance? Did I unmute you? This technology is doesn't always seem to work. All right. Anyone have a question or a thought that they can share? Still says muted. All right, hold on for one moment. I guess. All right, try it now. Still says muted. All right, hold on. All right. I think everyone's unmuted if you'd like to ask a question. All right, hold on, Lisa. All right, let me see if I can bring this over. Can you give us some examples of how to build relationships with upper management? All right, Lisa, thank you. All right, I'm just going to mute this. All right, a little feedback there. All right, I just had to put everyone on mute. Sometimes the feedback, this is part of the problem with this wonderful technology. So build relationships with upper management. There's always a challenge, because some managers don't want to build a relationship. They want to keep it professional. But one of the things I would definitely sit down with my manager and have 3 questions I would ask them. How would you like me to communicate with you when I need something or when you need me? Just like a customer. I think one of the things that's interesting, we'll talk to our customers and ask them, when would you like me to follow up? How would you like me to follow up with you? And if I have something of importance, how would you like me to send it to you? Mail, email, stop by your office. And I think when you're working with managers, I don't think we have that discussion enough. Some managers are basically, they want to keep people out of sight, out of mind, unless there's a problem. And I think it depends on the culture of the company and the organization you're working with, but also that individual's management style. So one of the things you might want to ask is, other than the communication preferences, if I do have a problem or when should I reach out to you, is what can I do to be a better part of your team? Since you're my team leader, you're my manager, what can I do to integrate and be part of your team? There's a lot of assumptions, Lisa, on, and again, I hate to say it, but most managers, at least in my experience, are focusing on their top 10% and their bottom 10% of their team, and the people in the middle may not get the attention. I know many organizations, they used to have a team where you had one manager for every 10 or 15 people. Now they're 20 to 25 because they're trying to increase profitability. So having a discussion and saying, how do we best communicate as a team and how to best interact with you and be part of your team, opens that discussion to building that relationship. And also, the other thing is, how often do we or should we follow up with each other? Because that's one of the things that, and this is my personal mistake, I thought my manager, I thought I was doing him a favor by not reaching out to him every time I got stuck. So I would go weeks and sometimes a couple months. The reality is it's top of mind awareness. How often should we stay in touch with each other and connect? And that's a great way to start that process. All right. So let me just follow up your question. My challenge is with my second manager and people at corporate. You're in your top 10%. All right. So can you give me an example, Lisa, what your second manager is? Do you have two managers? An internal and an external? My manager's manager. Okay, thank you. So again, this is a little bit more difficult. I don't know what the expectation is for your manager's manager. Are you trying to stay in touch with her because it's part of the job, or are you trying to stay in touch with them because you want to keep them in the loop of what's happening in the field? You're a regional manager, okay. All right, so if it's your regional manager, Lisa, I think your goals are still the same. See if you can schedule a meeting and ask them, what's the best way I can stay in touch? How often do you want to be in the loop? What type of information would you like me to share? Because if you're asking, and again, my personal experience, when I ask people what their needs are or how they best prefer I communicate with them, it opens the door to a greater understanding both ways in that relationship. What you're saying is, I care about the relationship. I want to make sure I give you the right information when you need it, the way you need it. Is that what you're looking for, Lisa? All right, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. All right, other questions or thoughts? Anyone else have a question or information they'd like to share? I still have everyone on mute because there's some feedback, so I apologize for that. If you'd like to interact, Scott. Yep, hold on, Scott. Let me get over there. If you're driving, it's probably not the best way to do it. All right, take it away, Scott.
Hey, Steve. Hey, can you hear me?
Certainly can.
All right, great. First, I just wanted to point out, I really appreciate you highlighting and delving into the empathy topic of discussion, because I think it's something that's routinely not acknowledged. So it's a good reminder. And my question is to that point. showing empathy not only in professional relationships but personal. And I can identify with in doing that on both sides. And when it comes professionally, particularly with customers, current customers that are having issues, and I'm having to problem solve or put out a fire, I think that goes a long way. But can you discuss how empathy plays a role in the selling process, particularly on the first or second touch with a prospective client?
I'll do my best. That's I don't say a loaded question, but I think without knowing your product and the process, and I'll give you an example of what I mean, there are some products in the sales process where you may have a limited interaction where empathy plays very little part. Consumer products come to mind. I don't know if you're selling a product or a service or a combination. But for me, and I'll just use an example that comes to mind for me. When I was selling orthopedic trauma, and again, this depending on the touch, I had to go in and talk to a surgeon who was taking call on the weekend and the evenings, who would be there in the middle of the night trying to deal with an inexperienced surgical team on the weekends, not because they weren't good at their job, is that on the weekends you have the eye nurse, the OB, the general surgery nurse taking call, and if you were lucky, you maybe had someone who did orthopedics. So for me, I knew what he was under. When I had this discussion and we were talking about using equipment, excuse me, I know that he needed to get this procedure done as quickly as possible with little muss, little fuss, and it had to be streamlined. And I was part of that process. So I knew exactly what he was going through, and I was able to help him say, listen, I know what you're going to be running into on a snowstorm on a Saturday night with people who don't want to be there, but here's some ways I may be able to help you. And that grabbed his attention. Right. So if you're in the second touch of that, and I'm a firm believer, and again, not knowing your situation and your touch points, this is a process. And if you have to touch someone 4 or 5 times before you get that next buy-in, the expectation on the second or third meeting is to what? Is it to build that rapport? Is it to understand what they're going through if you're doing a needs assessment? Or are you trying to connect with this individual and say, I know what your challenges are, I understand what you're trying to do, and I may have a solution. Granted, you're not going to do all of that at one fell swoop. I always like the approach that, and this is going back to Lisa's point, when I met with a new doctor in my area, the first thing I said was, listen, I don't know if I can help you or not. I know what you're trying to do, but what I'd like to do is figure out when we do have a new product or a new service that I think may be helpful to you based on what I know you do. You're a general orthopedic surgeon taking call once a month or once every 2 weeks. How often would you like me to come by, or how would you like me to get this new information to you? And the funny part is when the first time I used that approach, because I tried the other going through the door, putting my head down like a battering ram and showing up and throwing up. And when that didn't work, I said, well, why don't I just ask how they want me to come in? And the amazing part is I got them talking, and the more they talked and the more I listened, the easier it was for me to help them.
Yeah, it breaks down their defense mechanism.
Right. Not threatening. I hate selling, but I love when people buy. But that only works if I understand what they're looking for.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Any other questions or thoughts while we're out there? Anyone else that want to share something? All right, Barry, hold on. Yes, I muted you, Barry. Hold on. All right. Can you hear me now? Barry, you're unmuted. If you want to say hi. Oh, she's not able to communicate at this point. All right, excellent. Anyone else have a feedback or thought or anything else they'd like to throw out before we wrap it up? Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is you'll get a couple follow-up emails from me going forward. I want to thank you for being part of the webinar. I hope I was able to share some information and insight with you. If I can be of any assistance going forward, any follow-up questions, feel free to drop me an email. I'm more than happy to chat offline, because some of these things it's hard to take 2 minutes and summarize it. But more importantly, if I see you online, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, if I can be of any assistance, please let me know. Have a great day, everyone. Stay warm, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.